Daniel, thank you, and thank you to The Economist for bringing us together, and to my old friend Nikos and my new friend Avarov for sharing this panel with me. For those who may wonder why this aberration, government officials and then an NGO, American Jewish Committee, together on the panel, I think it requires just a word of explanation. In the early 1980s, roughly 40 years ago, we wondered about a diplomatic anomaly, and that was 3 countries in the Eastern Med, all democracies, geographically close to one another, with certain cultural similarities that were essentially engaged in chilly, if not frigid, diplomatic ties. And those 3 countries, of course, were Cyprus, Greece, and Israel. In fact, it should be recalled that Greece was the very last West European country to formally recognize the State of Israel, and did not do so and extend full de jure relations until 1990, 42 years after the creation of the state. And Greece, throughout much of this period, again, as you'll know better than I, was in some respects not just challenged in its relations with Israel, but had a topsy-turvy relationship with the United States. And meanwhile, Cyprus was a country that identified itself largely, Avarov, with the non-aligned movement, and therefore saw itself by that position as being at some distance both from the United States and from Israel. We couldn't accept this status quo. And together with our Hellenic American friends, we believed that we could help forge a new relationship among these 3 countries. And that, in fact, is exactly what happened. And it happened to an earlier point made because of the vision of leaders in the region. But the second question for us, Daniel, became, fine, those leaders emerged. But would the vision be sustained? Or would it be relegated to a particular person or even a particular party? And I think what we've seen unfold, especially in the case of Cyprus and Greece, if I may say so, is the institutionalization of the recognition of the triangle. The sense that this was no longer about one leader or one party, but as we saw transitions from right to left in all 3, in Cyprus and Greece, and back, the process continued to the point where today we can actually speak about a strategic triangle among Greece, Cyprus, and Israel. 40 years ago, that was inconceivable. And that's why I think, Daniel, that this occasion should encourage us to continue to visualize the next big steps. And not simply focused on status quo management, important as that obviously is for all the countries concerned. And to us, the next big step is to take a page from the histories of Robert Schuman and Jean Monnet, the visionary French diplomats who, after the Second World War, were given a not-so-simple task: prevent a third world war on the European continent. And from that assignment, as you know, in 1951, emerged the 6-member coal and steel community, which eventually evolved into the European Union. And as we saw in the earlier session, the sense that not only are there 27 countries now bound by common fate, but aspiring countries who are doing everything possible to join the group, knowing what the rules of the game are. I'm suggesting that just as coal and steel served a purpose in the early 1950s, that we should be focusing on 3 E's: energy, electricity, and environment, as a new basis for an expanded network of cooperation in the Eastern Med. And I don't think today that that is simply pie in the sky. To the contrary, I think that this vision, which we have been promoting now for several years, is beginning to take hold. It's beginning to take hold in the East Med Gas Forum, whose membership includes several key Arab countries. It's taking hold in the Filia Group, in other configurations that we're beginning to see. And I would just note, as a final point, because we're sitting in Greece, that for us there are three concentric geopolitical circles, Daniel, in which Greece sits or abuts, which to us suggests that Greece has a central role in helping define this big future of cooperation and networking across the Eastern Med and through the Middle East and North Africa. Number one, of course, is the strategic triangle of Greece, Cyprus, and Israel, and I must say, encouraged and supported by the United States, and particularly by our exceptional ambassador, Jeffrey Pyatt, who serves in Athens and who's been at the conference. Number two, the growing circle of peace in the Arab world with Israel, which now includes 6 countries openly and fully engaged with Israel, and several other countries on the sidelines, watching the process with growing interest and curiosity and even levels of participation. And third, to the earlier session, a growing number of Balkan countries who also understand that they have a stake in the future of this region, including the Eastern Med. And so I think through creative, visionary, persistent diplomacy on the part of Greece, joined by Cyprus, supported by the United States, encouraged by Israel and others, we could one day be reconvening at an economist conference in 10 years, 15 years, and talking about an entirely reimagined region, a far cry from where we are today, but an even farther cry from where we were in the early 1980s.